Hello, everyone. I have 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, and so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah Francis, and I am overseeing the research aspects of the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center through Iowa State University. My work is at Iowa State University. I want to welcome you to the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center's webinar, Gray Hairs and Rocking Chairs, Exploring Our Own Age-Related Biases. We are excited to welcome Dr. Erin Yelland, who is an associate professor of gerontology and director of the Center on Aging at Kansas State University. Erin studies the social determinants of health, particularly within the context of well-being and healthy aging, and pursues community-based interventions that aim to improve the lives of older adults. During today's session, Erin will help us better understand unconscious biases and how those biases influence our thoughts and behaviors towards others, specifically within the context of older adults and ageism. She will also help us explore how to better ourselves and our own perceptions so that we can better serve older adults and their families. Before we get started, I want to mention some housekeeping items. First, we will hold questions until the end of Dr. Yelland's presentation. Our team will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. Please write any questions you may have here in the chat. We will start the Q&A session with the chat questions first. You can also raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of your screen and ask your question orally. At the end of the Q&A session, we encourage everyone to complete the evaluation that is accessible with a QR code or the link that will be placed in the chat at the end of Dr. Yelland's presentation. The information you provide will help us during the next webinar. The Nutrition and Aging Resource Center is continuously working to improve the accessibility of events and content. Automated closed captioning will be provided for this webinar. Participants can enable captions by selecting the CC in the toolbar or closed caption in meeting options. This webinar will also be recorded and made available on YouTube. The video with captions revised for precision will be shared via the Resource Center's newsletter. If you have any questions about the captions or additional accommodation requests, please email the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center at nrcna@iowa.gov. Dr. Yelland, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm seeing where everyone is from. And boy, we have a great group here from all over the country. I see at least one of you from Hawaii, which makes me a little bit jealous. But as Sarah said, I'm Erin Yelland from Kansas State University. And I am just so honored and privileged to be here with you today, talking about ageism, something that I'm particularly passionate about, and really just talking about how we can better understand our own biases and how we can continue to grow and learn and do better. So to get us started, I want to do a bit of an interactive question for you. So you can answer in the chat, and I will try and read as many of them as I can as we go. So to start us, what words come to mind when you think about age, aging, or old? What words immediately come to mind? Don't think about it, just write it. Frail, limited mobility, gray hair, health conditions, memory, vibrant, just a number, experience, older, dread, not valued, alert, retired, wisdom, experience, grandma, needy, hungry, limited, vulnerable, great stories. I agree with that one. Lonely, decline, you're getting too close. Retirement, wise, retired, not relevant, getting up in age, health issues, rich history, in need of support. You wish you were European. Injustice, experienced, losing memory, fixed income. Okay. Knowledgeable, wise, honest, illness, death, memory loss, more time. Awesome. I'm there and it's an interesting adventure. Thanks for sharing that, Mary. And abilities. So you can continue to pop those in the chat, but I very much appreciate you responding to that. And you can see some trends in there that we have some, particularly what some may consider to be negative things. We also have a lot of really good positive things that are in there as well. So remember that question, remember some of those responses, and we're going to come back to that later and continue talking about that question. But before we do move on, I just want to say that I have asked this question in different contexts with all kinds of ages, from kiddos to older adults themselves. And what I have found to be very interesting is that the answers are almost always the same. I hear a lot of the same words over and over and over again, and sort of still see those polarizing terms, you know, things are really good or things are really bad. So y'all are no different than other audiences I've asked this question to. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about what unconscious biases are and how they influence us, thinking a little bit about where we personally stand, and then exploring how we can grow. So I'm not going to be necessarily giving you all of the answers today. There really are no right answers to everything as we go through talking about implicit biases and ageism. So I really want you to just be thinking about these things in the context of yourself, your own growth, your own aging experience. And we're going to learn and work through this together. So starting off, you probably have heard these terms before, unconscious or implicit biases. I have heard people use them interchangeably, essentially meaning that they all mean the same thing. So unconscious or implicit biases. I tend to use the word unconscious just because I think some people know what that means a little bit more than maybe saying implicit sometimes. So that's the term that I'll be using today. But those unconscious biases are social stereotypes that occur outside of your own conscious awareness. So these are thoughts and ideas that are deeply embedded within you that are oftentimes telling us to either favor or hold a prejudice against a particular person or a group of people. So what's important to really understand about the unconscious part is that these are automatic. They're unintentional. We didn't necessarily create them in our own brains, but they do have a really, really, really big impact on us. And they really affect our judgment, our decisions, our behaviors. So even though they're these thoughts that we don't even necessarily recognize are there, they are incredibly powerful. And don't worry, everybody's doing it. You're not alone. We're all in the same boat with these unconscious biases. And bias is absolutely everywhere. So not only is everybody doing it, all the cool kids are doing it, right? But it's absolutely everywhere. But what's interesting is that we don't always see it or recognize it, and it can be invisible. So it completely surrounds us. So you'll see on the left, it's in the air that we breathe, and then on the right, it's in the water that we drink, right? So completely surrounds us. And there's so many ways that bias sort of incorporates itself into our lives and where this all comes from. So we see a lot of it coming from media. So whether that's movies, TV, books, ads, all those sorts of things, our upbringing. What did our parents tell us about aging? What did our grandparents say? Our culture, and even the conversations that we hear and that we engage in, and the vernacular that we use across our lifespans. So the influencers of bias really are absolutely everywhere. We really can't avoid it. So it's sort of what we do with that that matters. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So what really makes bias and unconscious biases even more powerful is the associations that we draw between these things, right? So we have these unconscious biases, we have these thoughts deeply embedded in our brains that are really affecting everything that we do. But within that, it's those associations that really start to matter and really start to make some big differences. So having those results in these connections, and those connections then ultimately tell us what we think, what we feel, what we do. Again, saying that they influence our judgment, our decisions, how we talk to people, how we engage with people. But what's really important to remember is that these things are deeply embedded and they happen quickly because we can't really control them very much sometimes. So to demonstrate how quickly and naturally these associations occur so that we can get a little bit better understanding of what in the world I'm talking about here. So I'm going to ask you a question, okay? So get ready to type your answer in the text box, okay? So if I say peanut butter, you say blank. What is the blank? Jelly. Yes. Everyone. Oh, banana. I like that one too. Yes. It's so quick. Immediately. I mean, it was like milliseconds and the first jelly was in the chat box, right? If I say peanut butter, you say jelly. We make these connections so quickly. So even something as simple as peanut butter and jelly, that's harmless. Well, peanuts may not be harmless to all people, but let's say the word association is harmless. Peanut butter, jelly. It's quick, it's automatic, it's natural for us. So we draw this immediate connection. This obviously may not be true for all cultures, for all personal histories, but for many of us, clearly it is. So we don't even have to think about it. And what's tying it back then to our implicit biases, our own unconscious biases, we're essentially conditioned to make these assumptions, to make these connections by different stimuli, by different cues. I said peanut butter, you say jelly. You might see peanut butter on the shelf at the store and then automatically think, oh, do we have jelly? So we can make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So as easy as it is to put those things together, it's just as easy to put other things together as well. So here is the next slide, transforming a little bit from peanut butter and jelly to some more serious topics and why we're here today. So these word associations, these connections that we make just as easily as we associate peanut butter and jelly. It's quick, it's easy, and it happens without us even realizing it. So these are research-informed and research-based associations that we have found for years, okay? So when we see, or when research participants see pictures of Black men, they're more likely to associate them with violence and crime. When you see pictures of an Islamic person, they are more likely to associate them with being a terrorist. When we see a picture of what some may consider or perceive to be a fat person, we associate them with laziness. When we think about poor people, we might associate them with welfare. And welfare really isn't an accurate term anymore, but we still think about that history and say, oh, they're poor, they're naturally on welfare and taking advantage of the system. How many times have we heard these types of things? Whether, it's in your family, your friends, on social media, we see these types of connections happening. And then if you're differently abled, we oftentimes have these associations that they're incapable, they're weak, they can't do the same things as more able people. We can't expect someone who's in a wheelchair to do things that a person who is not. We can't expect them to do the same things. So we make these associations, and quite honestly, like some of these are probably making your skin crawl a little bit. And that's totally okay. But the bottom line is these things happen. These are research-based. We see this, and I'm sure many of you can at least draw some connection there, right? Like you have seen this happen, you've heard this happen. And these are real things. When we see Black men, yep, they're thugs, they're violent, they shoot guns, they do all of these yucky things, right? We're making these associations. So what does that association mean then when we talk about old people? So first of all, let's use the term older adults, right? That's the term that we like to say. But what do we associate when we think of old people? So those are some of the things that you answered earlier, that they're weak or frail, that they have health concerns, frail, that they have memory issues, that they all have gray hair and sit in rocking chairs and knit socks and do all these things, that they are incontinent and need to live in nursing homes and can't take care of themselves, can't remember things, right? We make these connections just as quickly as we do the other ones listed on this screen, and just as quickly as we do the peanut butter and jelly. All right. So we talked a little bit about what these biases are, what that definition is, what that looks like, those word associations or those visual cue associations. But what's really important to recognize is that you're not this big, terrible person if you have these associations and if you have thought these things before. You're not, because everyone holds these unconscious beliefs. They're not necessarily all bad. They're not necessarily all good, but we all are doing it. Everyone's doing it, okay? We all have these unconscious beliefs. Okay, and if you don't, there's a thing called blind spot bias. So if you think that you don't have bias and that you don't draw these connections and that this isn't you, you don't qualify for this, then you have what's called a blind spot bias. So if you don't think this applies to you, then you might be falling prey to this blind spot bias, which really allows you to see the biases of others and not yourself. But we are all biased and no one is immune to that. But our unconscious biases are way more powerful and way more prevalent, really, than our conscious biases. So everyone has it. We're all navigating these things in our brains and in our lives. But those unconscious biases really are those things that we need to be thinking about and targeting. So the best way to highlight this is through that sort of iceberg approach, right? So we always know that underneath the iceberg, you know, that's the biggest part. That is the thing that's really serving as that foundation for that little tip of the iceberg up there on top, right? So one of those things that really distinguishes unconscious versus conscious biases is the concept of intentionality, because we can have all of these things underneath, you know, that big part of the iceberg underneath the water, thinking that older adults are frail, gray hair, rocking chairs, dementia, can't remember anything, you know, senile, all of these words, weak, incapable, all of those things that that society has told us that they are. But it's that top part that really matters. It's that intentionality that then really translates into the top part of that iceberg. And there's a lot of those things in that foundation that influence our choices and what we do and who we are. And so let's think about that a little bit and think about that concept of intentionality. So I'm going to be completely honest here and put myself out there, talk about the uncomfortable. So this isn't related to ageism, but rather racism. So to highlight this, I grew up in a very racist family. I still hear comments, I still hear things all the time that are incredibly racist, uncomfortable, coming from immediate members of my family, okay? So honest, blunt, it's there in my family. That's that unconscious bias that then my family has directly influenced in my life. That's that big iceberg. And in my life, I have intentionally chosen to fight back against what's underneath that iceberg and really focus on what is that top part. What do I personally consciously believe, and what do I do outwardly? How do I treat people? How do I push back against racism and other injustices in society? So these things have been ingrained in my brain, and I know that I'm not alone on this call, that we all have our own experiences, mine with racism, to the point that, at the Thanksgiving dinner table, there was conversations about how Black people were bad and thugs and violent and always up to no good. To be blunt with you, Arabs were called towelheads in my household and terrorists. And if you don't own a gun, according to some of my family members, you don't own a gun and vote Republican, then you're a snowflake. And these thoughts still come to mind sometimes, right? Because they are those unconscious beliefs. But it's what you do with those that then matters. I think that every single thing is that, my family has said and sort of exposed me to in that realm, right, is completely repulsive and disgusting. And it makes my skin crawl, and I hate it. I hate it. So what I really have to do is purposefully fight back against that and be so conscious about my thoughts, my ideas, my actions. And it's one of those things that you have to work really, really hard to overcome. So that's my personal example and personal story with racism. But obviously we can see that the same thing can happen with ageism as well, right? So I have heard my grandparents say, oh, I'm too old to do that, or I can't go out and do that anymore because I'm too old, or that's what old ladies do. I've heard, family members of mine who are younger asking questions about wrinkle cream and anti-aging serums and all of these things. And, that's what society is telling us we need, that, being older and growing old is bad. And we need creams and serums and all of these things because God forbid we get a wrinkle, right? God forbid. So we have all of those things underneath that iceberg, right? All of those things under the water, telling us how we should be thinking, how we act, what we should do. But at the end of the day, right, that message the message that I want to give to you is it's that top part that matters. It's what we do with that matters. It's that intentionality. So those unconscious biases are really strong, and they really can overpower our conscious biases if we're not careful. But as I've been saying, we oftentimes find that those unconscious biases, those things that are just sort of built in our brain, they're often incompatible with our conscious values, as I've shared. I don't believe that Arabs or Islamic people are towelheads. I don't believe that, all Black men are violent and thugs and dangerous. I don't believe these things. I really don't. And so therefore they are just very much incompatible with my own conscious values. And as such, having those implicit biases doesn't mean that you're going to act that way. Those don't always equal your outward actions. So when you hold a negative implicit bias or unconscious bias about something, that doesn't automatically mean that that's going to be reflected in who you are, how you treat people, what you think, what you say, what you do. Again, it's those intentional, conscious decisions that we make that ultimately affect ourselves, individuals, families, and society around us. And thinking about professionally, it's that intentionality of working with the people that we do. How do we treat people who were lower income families when we might have been taught that poor people are just lazy? Why don't they just go get a job? Or I've even heard the phrase recently. So I have a former student and good friend of mine who works for a nonprofit that works to help and support families who are food insecure. And someone legitimately made a comment on an opinion piece that was in the newspaper that she had written about why would you be talking about food insecurity when you look the way you do because you look like a fat pig. Like, what are we doing? You know, it's those, we might have that implicit bias, but what are we doing on that outward action, right? It's that thing that matters, those outward actions that matters. So it's what we do. So we have those thoughts, we have those things built into our brains, but we don't have to act on it. So I really think that even though I've said a lot of things about how we have all of these negative biases, we have all of these unconscious biases that can be super duper yucky, right? But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad. You've heard me talk a lot about intentionality, that tip of the iceberg, what we actually do. So it's important to know that we should not and cannot draw the conclusion that bias is bad, because it's not. In my opinion, we can take these negative biases, these negative thoughts that we have, these negative associations that we draw, those peanut butter and jellies, we can take them and turn them into positives, because we can recognize those biases and then hold ourselves accountable and push ourselves to become who we want to be and treat people the way that we would want to be treated. So implicit biases aren't bad. We all have them, but it's what we do with them that matters. So let's go ahead and take a second to talk about what it can look like when we accept those biases and stereotypes as truth. So we've talked a little bit about how we can have these biases and make these connections, and it might impact how we outwardly interact with other people. But what happens to ourselves? So let's take it back to the concept of ageism. Internalized ageism. So this is where we think that getting old is bad, and God forbid I have a wrinkle, so I need to go out and buy all of these fancy serums and creams, which, by the way, does nothing for your skin, because your collagen and all of those things are still going to break down no matter what you do. But one of the ways that we see ageism being actualized, or how it actually plays out, is through internalized ageism. So essentially what we're telling ourselves and what we're believing ourselves. So I said before, I have heard my grandma say so many times, I'm too old for that. Why are you too old for that? Like, why is that a thing? Why are you telling yourself that? Like, are you really too old for that? You know, I might be, I don't know, too short to go ride on a roller coaster. Like my son was too short to go ride on a roller coaster. Like that's true. That's something we can't help. But I'm too old for that. You can help that. We can change that rhetoric in our own minds. Another one, take me out back and shoot me. How many times have you heard this before? Maybe even you've said it yourself. You know, if I get too old and too sick and I'm incontinent and can't take care of myself, just take me out back and shoot me. That's internalized ageism. Why would I want to live a life like that? Just take me out back. I don't want to live in a nursing home because that's for old people. Yeah, internalized ageism yet again. You know, nursing homes aren't necessarily just for old people. There's really great continuing care retirement communities. I think many of you may have seen them. They're unfortunately not very prevalent in more rural areas, but in bigger urban areas, we see a lot of them. And these are like, honestly, living in the independent living like portion of a continuing care retirement community sounds like so much fun to me, because everyone gets together, they have great community and social activities and go on field trips and do all these fun things. Like this actually sounds exciting, right? Like the traditional nursing home, probably not. But I can understand why that's not exciting and that's not a life goal for us, right? But why do we think that nursing homes are so darn bad? Why do we want to avoid them because they're for old people? Really, they're there to help us and help our families as well. Another thing, I'm too old to have sex. Yes, I just said the S word, SEX. I'm too old to have sex. This is one area that I've done some research in, and I'm actually teaching a class this summer at K-State called our Sexuality and Aging class. But this is another way that we internalize ageism. Why should I engage in romantic and intimate relationships anymore? I'm too old for that. That's for young people. No, that's not for me. I'm going to die anyway, so might as well smoke my cigarettes or do the unhealthy behaviors that you want to do because you're going to die anyways. Why do we think like that? And I'm not going to the senior center with all of those old people. Again, it's one of those things, you know, a senior center is a really awesome place. I think many of you work alongside senior centers in your communities. I saw a lot of you were from Meals on Wheels. There's a lot of great connections there. Senior centers play a really good part in our communities and in people's lives. So why do we avoid them? Because those are for old people. Why do we internalize that ageism? And really, honestly, deprive yourselves of that connection and that the opportunities that those organizations provide. And when we think about all of these things and we internalize that ageism, when we think that you're too old or I'm too old to do all of these things, you know, I'm too old to get down and play with my grandkids on the floor because there's no way I'm getting back up. You know, the moment that you stop getting on the floor to play with your grandkids is the moment that you're done getting on the floor to play with your grandkids. Why would you want to, why do we have to internalize that ageism and not get down and play with our grandkids? Sure, people have mobility issues 100%, but I'm too old is a pitiful excuse to not get down and play with our grandkids, right? Why are we thinking this? And when we think those things, our bodies respond in really negative ways. So as you can see here on your screen, when we internalize those things and tell ourselves that we're too old for that, we actually see lower life expectancies by several years, like not just like a month or two, several years of decreased life expectancy when you internalize ageism. High blood pressure as well, reduced self-esteem and reduced motivation. You know, if you have that sort of thought in your head that I'm too old to do that, I'm not going to get out there, you know, you have that reduced motivation, reduced self-esteem. I think when we think about, you know, that last slide and all of these things that we might be telling ourselves and then look at these negative effects, well, yeah, it makes sense. We also see regarding that SEX word and people saying that you're too old to have sex, we see that there's a lot of reduced relationship satisfaction, reduced perceptions of intimacy and relationship satisfaction, sexual satisfaction. It all relates and spills over. There's a definite domino effect between ageism, what we think, how we treat ourselves, and how our bodies respond to it as well. So we've talked a lot about unconscious biases, what they are. They're all there. We're all doing it. We all have them. Sometimes they can be positive. Sometimes they can be negative. These are influenced by so many things. You know, look at Viagra commercials, right? They're all like 40-year-old women laying on a bed wearing blue, holding a football, because that's apparently who men should be having sex with when you're older. We have these things, these ads telling us that, you know, you need these wrinkle creams, you need these serums, protect your skin. Anti-aging is all the rage. Why is this something that's so scary to us? Because society and media are telling us that that's just the way it is. So we all have those unconscious beliefs. We know that those unconscious biases are so prevalent. And they can be very powerful in influencing our conscious biases, how we treat ourselves, how we treat others. But oftentimes those unconscious biases are incompatible and do directly conflict with what we actually believe. And so again, it's that intentionality, that tip of the iceberg that we really want to be working on. So what's the next step? What can we do about this? You know, I've told you all of these things. Your mind's probably hurting, thinking, oh my gosh, what do I do? I'm completely ruined, but you're not. There's things that we can do. So we're going to talk about some of those. So I really like this concept of spying on yourself. So just really taking some time to reflect on what you think, how you treat people, what you're believing, really taking some time to be purposeful. Like when you do see that Viagra ad, just to be like, oh my gosh, that lady's 40, laying on a bed wearing blue and holding a football. Erin was right. You know, being more just aware of these things. So spying on yourself, spying on society and what it's telling you. So thinking specifically about, you know, what I did versus what I wanted to do. So did I respond or react the way that I consciously wanted to? Or did my unconscious biases sneak in and get me, right? Did those unconscious biases influence how I wanted or how I ultimately treated someone? Thinking or asking yourself, would I have done something different if the person wasn't old or wasn't an older adult? Would I have done or treated someone differently if they weren't Black, or if they weren't a certain religion, or didn't look like you, didn't talk like you, didn't act like you? Then thinking about yourself, how were you ageist to yourself? You know, maybe you made a comment or made that comment, I'm too old for that. Well, call yourself out on that. Recognize it and see it, because we all have that in us. We definitely do. I found myself making comments like, oh, I'm getting so old. Like my joint popped or something. And, you know, my immediate response is, oh, so old, because that's what I've heard people say my entire life. So thinking about how are we treating others? What are our thoughts? How are we treating ourselves? Did I make an ageist comment at a birthday party? Did I buy an ageist birthday card? Like, sure, we may laugh at them, and honestly, some of them are funny, but they're totally ageist. So really taking that minute to step back and think about it. And then recognizing our triggers. So this was really fascinating to me, because I didn't realize how big of an impact our triggers have on sort of activating our unconscious biases. So what I mean by triggers: being tired. When I'm tired, I am grumpy, I'm snippy, I say things I don't mean. So that's a trigger for me, right? When I'm stressed out, woof, you know, same stuff. When I'm new to a situation or unsure of something, or I'm working too quickly, you know, those can be triggers for me. So thinking in your professional lives, you know, when you're stressed out with work, are you taking the time that you should to have beneficial, meaningful connections with people? And are you being intentional with your actions? How are you responding? And slow down. I've talked a lot about intentionality, taking time to think and reflect, and it's okay. You know, if you're having an interaction with an older adult and you're about to say something, but you catch yourself thinking that you catch yourself about to say something ageist, take a pause, take a breath, rephrase. It's so quick to roll off our tongue because of these strong unconscious biases. So take a minute and think about it, slow down, and then be purposeful and get uncomfortable. This and dealing with the isms can be very uncomfortable, right? It's not comfortable necessarily to be in a conversation and someone makes a racist comment and say, hey, I don't appreciate that. That was incredibly racist. And I would appreciate if you didn't say things like that. You know, that can be very uncomfortable for people. I don't like conflict. It's very uncomfortable for me. So being purposeful, getting uncomfortable, this can be with yourself, because it can also be really difficult to say, oh crap, I messed up. Oops, I said something I shouldn't have. I said something ageist. You know, I thought something ageist, or I didn't do something because I was too old. So think about that. Call yourself out, get uncomfortable, be purposeful, think about it, speak up, speak out. If you hear something ageist, call it out within your workplace, your community, your society. If you hear something, say something. Recently, with budget crises across different universities and just different organizations, we've seen some what they call voluntary separation incentive programs, which are early buyouts, early retirements. And literally, I was in a meeting where someone said, it's getting rid of the dead weight. And these are early retirement programs, so clearly age stipulations. So someone literally just said in a meeting with about 20 people that older adults are dead weight, then that we need to get rid of them. And I had to take a minute to gain my composure and not like explode, right? But why are we saying that? That's so inappropriate and so ageist and just disgusting. Like, you might think that might be your unconscious bias, but man, you just completely tanked on the tip of that iceberg there. So it was very uncomfortable to have to stand up and say, like, whoa, that was incredibly inappropriate and ageist, and that's not the way that this is going down. So thinking about it, being purposeful, getting uncomfortable. So sometimes being purposeful and getting uncomfortable isn't to that extreme, not to that level. Maybe it's interacting with people that you normally wouldn't interact with. In so many communities, there's coffee clubs or just different people who get together at the gas station for coffee every morning. Before my dad got really severe with his dementia, he would go to the gas station every morning with his friends, visit, hang out. And I went a few times, had the opportunity to go a couple of times, not a group that I would like typically hang out with, I guess, but it was really fun and really an awesome experience to go and chit chat with the folks at the coffee group. So being purposeful, that was me being purposeful and getting around older adults in my community. So next up, developing a vision. So I'm completely stealing this question from somebody else. So I can tell you where I was, like what I was doing, what specific part of the room I was in, but I cannot remember who said this and what presentation or conference I was listening to, but it was one of the most powerful things I had ever heard. And this one wasn't on ageism, it was on racism. So what would a world look like without ageism? She asked it in the concept of racism, and nobody could answer the question because, you know, we have these thoughts and ideas and this powerful influence. We want to fight back against these things, but what's that ultimate vision? What would it actually look like? That's a really hard question to answer. And the argument that she was making is that without a vision, what are we working toward? What are we doing? What does that mean? We can think about these steps, but what is the ultimate goal? And what does that actually look like? So that's a hard question, big question, no one right answer, but thinking about that, what would a world look like without ageism? Think about that question. I encourage you to think about that, whether it's ageism, racism, sexism, any of the other isms that we have. But lastly, and one of the most important things, it's okay to mess up. Sometimes those unconscious biases are going to sneak in, they're going to get us, but it's okay. What matters most is that we take that step back we think about it, we learn from it, and we work to do better next time. We're going to have those moments where we slip up, where we make an ageist comment, where my bones pop and I go, oh, getting so old. You know, I immediately caught myself and was like, darn it, Erin, you made an ageist comment. It's okay. But now I really try not to do that when my knee pops. We're being purposeful. It's okay. Let's keep learning and growing and working to really tackle those things. So my last question for you is, how will you move forward? We've talked about a lot of big, scary things today, a lot of ideas on how do we address these big thoughts and ideas in our brains that we can't control. How do we do this? It seems like a lot. You know, ageism is a big issue, but I really have this strong belief that it starts with us individually, how we treat ourselves, how we treat other people. You know, if we put good out, we get good back. So let's work to really address this. Let's work to, again, address it within ourselves and with the people that we work with our colleagues, the people that we serve. So a final question for you then is, with all of the things that I've talked about today, what is one step that you will take after hearing me chat today? What's that one thing that you're going to do to move forward, to really be more purposeful about ageism in your own life? And go ahead and put it in the chat. Thank you. Speak up, call yourself out and others, spy on myself. Good, I love it. Catch my own comments, quit saying I'm too old to do stuff, being more self-aware. Stop referring to myself as I'm old. You're getting 50 or turning 50 next month. Calling yourself out. Giving yourself grace if you slip. Yes, I love that. Giving yourself grace. It's okay to mess up. Focus on being intentional, not buying in when contemporaries start complaining about aches and pains. Listening to myself and your own comments. Stop calling myself old and that I feel like I'm 90. Oh, Janet, I love this. As a woman over 60, I'm often so hard on myself about my aging looks when I should be thankful that I'm still physically and mentally active. Yes. Oh, this is a good one, Diane. Working with your direct mail vendor to eliminate the words elderly and where's the other one? It skipped out for me. And using the word frail elderly. Speaking up when seeing ageism, embracing your age spots and wrinkles. I love gray hair. I think it's so beautiful. One of my colleagues had dark black hair and it started going gray and she just kept dyeing it. And finally she gave up. And she has the most beautiful hair. Totally embrace that. Okay. Gray is beautiful. Check myself and educate others. Oh, I love that. That you do not refer to your Meals on Wheels recipients as seniors. Instead, they are clients. Yes. It does have to be intentional, though sometimes it is hard. Completely agree. Oh, Beth, you like the purple tones over gray hair? Awesome. Okay, well, keep those ideas coming. Keep those next steps coming. If you have more ideas, hopefully we can all learn from each other. Oh, Joan, there's an issue with Microsoft and other clip art photos. Few older people and the ones they have are obviously models. Great. And yes, there are fantastic resources at the Reframing Aging initiative and that website that was put in the chat there. Okay. Oh, I like that one. Remembering to recalibrate at every stage of our life. Okay, so yes, Savannah just put in the chat to use the Q&A for any questions that you have. Up on the screen, if you scan the QR code, will take you to their evaluation of the webinar. And I will pass it back to our Q&A moderators. And the survey link is there in the chat box too.
Thank you, Dr. Yellen. That was a fascinating webinar. I was reviewing the comments, and I think we all saw ourselves at some point in your presentation. I would like to open the floor for some questions. Let's see. Yep. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to place any questions. I think you answered everything, it looks like, or they're scared to ask something. If you're not comfortable typing, if you scroll at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a raise hand. You can raise your hand and you'll be unmuted so you can verbally ask your question. Francis, I see your question about if you can't scan the QR code. We will put the direct link in the direct link is in the chat as well. Savannah just placed that. It starts with iastate.qualtrics. Can you provide, we have a question. Can you provide an example of how to fight ageism in senior centers?
Really good question. I think there's probably a lot of different ways that we can do that, but I really appreciated some of the comments in the chat box about just being more mindful about what words we're using. Even calling it a senior center, I don't know that I have the right answer on what it should be called differently, right? Community center or something, but a lot of people don't identify with being a senior, right? We've seen that a little bit in some of the comments that we talked about today. But I do know I've been to several senior centers and have talked about positive aging and have slipped in a lot of comments about ageism and how we talk about ourselves getting older within that. So if there's a speaker in your community or even yourself and you want to talk and do a little talk on positive aging, I have found some people have really enjoyed that and appreciated that, and at least told me they were going to think a little differently about their own aging process. But really being mindful of those words, I think, is important. And inviting younger people in to senior centers, really opening up the audiences and the diversity within those centers can be helpful.
Another question that came in is my coworkers will often say, "Oh, I had a senior moment." Do you have a script for how to push back against that?
Well, I don't know that I have a script. So one of the things I tend to respond to uncomfortability with humor sometimes. So I personally would probably respond by like saying something like, "Oh, Sally, quit being so ageist. Come on. Like, let's just say that, you forgot," or something like that. But some people will say just directly like, "Hey, that comment's really ageist. Can we just say that you forgot instead? That made me feel uncomfortable," or something like that. So not necessarily a script, but I know there's a lot of good resources out there as well, from like Reframing Aging and other resources that can tell you how to better address that. But really, I think it comes down to yourself and what you're comfortable with, because if you're responding to that in a way that's not you, then that might also feel uncomfortable too.
We have a raised hand, SB Jordan. You're unmuted, so you can ask the question. We're not able to hear you.
I'm sorry. Let me try again. Um, can you hear me now? I had trouble getting on. I was late getting on. I just wanted to see if there was going to be a PowerPoint presentation that would be available for this.
We are recording this presentation, and we will be sharing the link once it's finalized with closed captioning, etc., via the center's YouTube page as well as their newsletter.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. We have another question in the Q&A. How do you respond? And this will be well, we have 5 minutes. So how do you respond to those who say, I am jumping on the ism bandwagon when I call out ageism?
That's a really good question and is blunt and honest, because people will say these things to us, right? But I think really the answer is, I've taken some more time to really think about this and learn about this, and I'm trying to grow and be a better person and treat people in a more respectful way. And you're not jumping on a bandwagon. Seems silly to me, because really, like, we're just trying to learn and grow and do better. And just because you weren't as knowledgeable about these things before doesn't mean that you can't be now, and that now you're automatically excluded from being able to talk about it. So maybe framing it as, I'm just really trying to do better and be more respectful about older adults. And that's it.
Aaron, another question came in. How do you approach in a indirect way to tell a supervisor about your concerns with ageism or other isms?
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question. An indirect way. Yeah, so with other isms, I know in our university system, obviously very large, we have a huge human capital services or HR unit, and several people have felt uncomfortable talking with a direct supervisor. So it's been a really good resource for them to go to HR or human capital services and talk about that. An indirect way is tough. Because being direct and saying, hey, I heard this comment, or hey, this comment was made and made me feel really uncomfortable, or I think, comments are being made like this and are really promoting a uncomfortable or negative work environment that's really affecting morale or something like that. I think it's probably word-wise easier to directly address it, but maybe another indirect way, like saying that it's happening without saying it's happening, is, hey, do you have any plans for any diversity trainings, or is that something that we're going to be doing in the future? I think it might be helpful or beneficial for our organization. That might be a way to indirectly say it without directly saying, hey, this is going on.
Thank you, Dr. Yelland. It's 12:58. I would like to remind all participants that we would love to hear from you regarding today's webinar. As I said earlier, it will help us prepare for our next webinar that is on August 26th, which continues our discussion about ageism and what we can do to help mitigate that within ourselves and within the organizations we work. So please do that. Savannah and Shelley have placed in the chat several times, like where you can sign up to receive the Nutrition and Aging Resource Center newsletter. It comes out, it's a great newsletter if you haven't signed up for it. And that newsletter will have the link. Shelley will be reaching out to everyone when the video is posted as well. I'm screening. Oh, we had one last question. We got a minute. So final question. How do I go about educating older adults on ageism indirectly or without seeming somewhat rude?
Good question. Hmm. Yeah, I'm struggling to come up with an immediate answer on this one. I think, again, talking about positive aging, maybe talking about, I've also seen, talking about the research and statistics on how ageism can take years off of our life, and sort of talking about more of those concrete things, or saying, or maybe even just if they say something that's ageist, maybe follow up, not directly to them, but sort of rephrasing it in a less ageist way. Reframing. So sometimes, you know, how you might be asked a question and then you rephrase the question to start off your answer, right? So you might be able to sort of rephrase that, and then you're indirectly showing a less ageist way to say that. That can be hard, because I understand that not wanting to be rude and addressing it in a positive way, because that certainly can be uncomfortable. But yeah, watching your language, trying to rephrase that language, talking about positive aging, I think those are some helpful things. But really good question.
Well, that wraps up a very wonderful hour. I want to thank everyone for taking time on a Friday afternoon to learn more about ageism and what we can do to fight against it and to improve our own and be more aware of our own conscious biases. I wish you all a wonderful weekend. I hope the weather is good where you are. It's calling for rain in Iowa, so hopefully that won't last too long. But y'all take care, and we'll see you in August on August 26th.